Hello, I'm back. I just had to take an extended break here, and I actually got the hiccups pretty bad after that last video. So there you go. There you go. I tried to refresh my makeup, and I have a little bit different. I have a green blanket now instead. So trying to go along with the theme here. So anyway, now this next section, topic, or whatever, goes right along with the denial section and what I was talking about earlier about victims and blaming victims. So another item, and I think personally, I think this is the most important one in all of this, is the fact that along with denying everything, these NPCs, these Vrill, these aliens, these psychopaths, sociopaths, is narcissists, I mean, technically is what it is. Um, Along with denying everything, these sickos are the first to blame the victims. So if they have to admit to anything, they'll say, all right, it did happen, but it's the victim's fault. All right, that person is physically ill, but it's their own fault for being physically ill. They would rather say that, that person died of a heart attack because they've been, smoking and drinking and eating nothing but fat their whole lives. And they'll even say, well, they had diabetes, rather than admitting that, no, the person had a hereditary condition, that caused them to keel over like that. And the more intelligent ones will say, well, that's it right there. It's their hereditary condition. It's still the victim's fault. They were doing stuff like that. They were more intelligent in the 80s and doing stuff like that, saying, oh, well, it's your bad blood. It's still the victim's fault. It's the victim's bad blood. Make sure not to mix with them. They have bad blood. That's what they do. That's what they do. So they're into blaming the victims. And for whatever reason, more than likely because of the hypnotizers that are going on. I post about this on Twitter, but you guys don't know about that. So for whatever reason, more than likely the hypnotizers that are controlling human minds, humans are especially open and willing to extremely dumbly go along with blaming the clear and obvious victim or victims. This is a crystal clear way to let those who are, one of these sickos, the ones who, this one of these sickos off the hook, So instead of blaming the robber, they blame 7-Eleven for being open all night long. Instead of blaming the abuser, they blame the woman who was abused. Instead of blaming the child, instead of blaming, like the company, the business that is absolutely ruining the air and the water and the land that this child was living on, that caused this child to die of cancer, they'll blame, all right, fine, they did die of cancer, but it's the child's fault, or it's the parents' fault for living there. It is horrible. It is horrible. And the humans go along with this. They just absolutely go along with it. It is, I can't wrap my head around it. They go along with it. So these Vrill and NPC characters are the first to point fingers of blame at the person who was hurt, abused, robbed, beaten up, scammed, what have you, instead of blaming the, quote, person, unquote, who actually did the abuse, who actually did the robbery, who actually did the beating in the first place. A lot of times, and this is the other thing, a lot of times across the board, what I've seen is that the people who are doing the sexual abuse, the beating of people, the robbing of people, who are actually, even the companies and the businesses that are poisoning the land, poisoning the air, poisoning the water, poisoning, putting out poisonous products too, that destroy areas of the globe far further than just where they are located and producing these products. Not only are humans refusing to admit and refusing to point the finger of blame at these businesses, at these companies, at these individual, people, unquote, but a lot of times the ones who are doing the abuse in the first place, the ones who are doing the beatings in the first place, the tortures in the first place, are actually not humans themselves. They are NPCs. They are Vrill. They are extraterrestrials, as you would call them. They are the non-humans. Literally, they are the non-humans, point blank. So the Vrill, NPCs, whatever you want to call them, who actually did the abuse, robbery, beating in the first place, they are non-humans. They're Vrill. They're NPCs. Case in point, and just to sum all of this up, case in point, there was a lady who was shot, who is now permanently in a wheelchair. She was shot by her fiance. So she's permanently in a wheelchair. And you can just feel the atmosphere turn automatically against her. What that is the brainwashing. That is the hypnotism. If you're automatically against her, then you have been brainwashed and you are acting on that brainwashing. You have been hypnotized and you're acting on that hypnotism. Literally. And you admit it. You will admit it, and you are admitting it now. Don't be hypnotized. Don't act on that hypnotism, that brainwashing. Don't be brainwashed, okay? So anyway, there was a lady who was shot who is now permanently in a wheelchair. Everyone she encounters demands to know how she got that way. And by the way, the people who are asking her, what happened to you? What happened? How did you end up in a wheelchair? They wouldn't be asking if they were humans. These are the Vrill, the NPCs, because those are the ones, they already know what happened to her. They want her to speak it publicly so that they can shame her publicly. All right? They ask, but the interesting thing is that they ask her, what did you do to piss him off? He's the bad guy. He shot her. He should not have shot her. He shot her and put her permanently in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. She can no longer walk. They, in retaliation to her, say, what did you do to piss him off? Literally. I'll read this whole thing again because I did break it up and it's scatterbrained. So there was a lady who was shot by her fiance who is now permanently in a wheelchair. Everyone she encounters demands to know how she got that way. They ask her, what did you do to piss him off? They literally blame her for being shot and not the shooter. What the fuck? Literally, what the fuck? He's the bad guy here. And by the way, you know who shot her? An NPC, a Vrill, a non-human, literally. Because if he was human, he wouldn't have shot her. Point blank, plain and as simple as that. If you're actually human, you actually have a heart. This isn't for the bleeding hearts in the world, but it definitely can be. You can definitely see anyone who's a bleeding heart, a human. And anyone who's not a bleeding heart, they're not a human. It's stark, it's crystal clear. You are acknowledging it now. I'm glad I'm bringing it to your attention. So there's a good example right there. She's lucky to be alive, yet these sickos are blaming her, the victim. This is another case, as I was speaking earlier about how it's blatant. It's just lying out there for everyone to see, hear, and know. And those in power do not care. They have never really believed in a cover or sheepskin in the first place. The only ones who was worried about, being covered or sheepskin are the humans who are working alongside them, which is a whole nother category. So I really want to go in more depth on this one, but I got to move on. I will elaborate and speak more on this later. It's inevitable. And what I mean is I'll elaborate and speak on more, later on about the topic of blaming victims. It's victim blaming. That's what it is, victim blaming. Instead of looking at the situation and going, oh, that, whoever did these horrible things should not have done them, you go and you sit there and you say that the victim is the bad guy and the victim deserved it. That is victim blaming. That needs to stop. And anyone who blames the victim, they are an NPC, they are a Vrill. You have it right there. It's blatant, it's obvious. For those who don't want to believe in NPC, Vrill, and extraterrestrials, they're literally the psychopaths, sociopaths, the narcissists amongst us. That is their personality. That is their personality type. They will expose themselves easily. And this is how you can tell. So I got to cut this one off. It's at the 10-minute mark. So on to the next one.